Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The one strange thing I noticed about the Bad Batch immediately is not Clone Force 99, but the lack of unique looking clones, especially on Kamino, where all the clones walk around helmetless. Literally every one of the clones in this TV show has the same haircut and is indistinguishable from one another. I mean, this is very uncharacteristic of the clones that we all know and love. If we take a look at the time Boba Fett infiltrated the GAR in order to kill Mace Windu, the clone cadets he was grouped with already had different hair colors and styles along with pretty unique personalities. It's not surprising that in a sea of identical faces, the individual clones would want to stand out somehow and develop their own unique personalities. It's not only for practical reasons, making it easier to identify each other, but also because it's in human nature. Even with their inhibitor chips and conditioning, clones still needed a self-identity, and that was really hard to come by when you looked like everyone else. And so today we'll be taking a look at why the clones on Kamino in the Bad Batch all look exactly the same. No tattoos, no dyed hair, all the same haircuts. I have 4 different theories, and we'll go through each one of them and look at their validity. The most likely possibility is that the clones we're seeing here on Kamino are all new recruits who have yet to be blooded. Because when you see a clone trooper with colorful armor, it's not actually paint on their armor, but the blood of aliens they've killed. The 501st were famous for massacring the blue Pantorans and Chiss, while Green Company liked to swim in the blood of fallen Rhodians. Okay, so none of that is true. That's just a periodic reminder we like to give on this channel that you shouldn't believe everything you hear on YouTube, especially when a person sounds really confident about what they're saying. Anyway, in the beginning of the Clone Wars, during the Battle of Geonosis, the entire army of the clone troopers were deployed at the same time. The majority of these clones all wore white armor without any marking or colors. Only clone commanders and officers like Pons had special armor designating their status. It's very possible that the clones we see during the Bad Batch are all replacements for battlefield casualties, which means that they won't be all deployed in the same unit or be creating a new unit. They'll instead be dispersed to various established units like the 501st or the 212th, which is also why these troopers have no color on their armor. They're all blank slates. Now, the one type of clone that seems to have color on their armor on Kamino and markings are the elite shock troopers. These clones were technically a part of the Coruscant Guard, so it is a bit strange seeing them all the way out here by Kamino.
Shock troopers? What's the Coruscant Guard doing here?
But if you take a closer look at how the clone shock troopers are used, they have quite a few roles. For instance, they supplemented the Senate Guard and protected the Republic's legislators along with the Supreme Chancellor. They also guarded prisons and helped maintain public order, and were also used as military police to watch over other clones. The clone shock troopers had a lot of different jobs, and many of these jobs were redundant, and I think that's something that Palpatine purposely had them do. You see, the clone shock troopers were all secretly bred on Coruscant and trained there to be extremely obedient. They're far more obedient than the rank and file clones who were trained by a wide assortment of different types of people, including Jedi and bounty hunters. I believe that the clone shock troopers represent the Supreme Chancellor's interest across the galaxy. It's his own private army. And on Kamino, they seem to have replaced the gray-clad Kaminoan security forces that used to keep order. Even before Tarkin arrives with his own attachment of clone shock troopers, the Reds are already ordering people around. It is possible that they are here on Palpatine's orders and he's cracking down on the individuality of the clones. If we take a look at the future Stormtrooper Corps that he creates, the entire concept depends on a lack of individuality. Names are replaced with numbers, and every Stormtrooper's helmet is monitored when they have it on. As a matter of fact, unnecessary chatter between troopers during a patrol was usually reprimanded by commanding officers. This was in order to make sure that these troopers didn't get to know each other too well or develop close emotional bonds. It's kind of similar to tactics used by large corporations for shift workers. They always move people around so that it's harder for workers to work with the same people and organize against their company. You see, the Stormtroopers were supposed to be replaceable. They were essentially organic battle droids. It's very likely that Palpatine wants all of the clones to revert back to their identical and very obedient nature. It probably pisses him off seeing a bunch of clones running around with cool tats and, color on their armor. Seems like that kind of guy. If these clones we see on Kamino are in fact untested and newly trained, as we theorized before, it makes sense that the new directive is to keep them as vanilla as possible. Now this points to a deeper truth about the clones. As much as we love individuals like Rex and Fives for their fiery personalities and individuality, it's very possible that clones left alone have very generic personalities and are just very plain. It takes outside influence and, more importantly, mentors to make the clones stand out. I guess you could say the same about human beings. We are highly affected by our surroundings and by the people who raise us. We know, for instance, in Legends that Jango Fett bought his Kovaldar to train the clone commandos. The Kovaldar was a collection of mercenaries and bounty hunters, many of them with a Mandalorian cultural background. The clone commandos trained underneath the Kovaldar began adopting a lot of their trainers' culture. Corellian mercenaries would teach their clones to be sketchy Corellians, and more commonly, Mandalorian mercs would teach their clones how to live by the Mandalorian code and even speak their language. At the same time, the Jedi commanders also had a big impact on the clones that they trained and led into battle. Some commanders like Anakin Skywalker really encouraged their men to be more individualistic and embrace who they are. Jedi commanders who treated their troopers like men and not like robots usually had very unique looking units. The 501st, for instance, was tatted up like crazy, and each individual clone really did stand out from one another. The clones we see on Kamino most likely have not fought underneath the Jedi yet, or were not a part of the first group of clones who were trained by Mandalorian mercs. These individuals probably were just given, very basic flash training and then just taught by the Kaminoans how to fight. Now there is one more possibility why all of these clones are identical, and it comes from some lore that originally spawned in Legends. But just because it's Legends doesn't mean it's not accurate or can't become true in the very near future. And that's because, as we've stated, no one in Star Wars appreciates Legends Expanded Universe content more than Dave Filoni. He's brought back many beloved characters and concepts from the Expanded Universe, including Thrawn, who he then just kind of whisked away with space whales. The point is, Dave Filoni is always looking towards Legends for new content. So in Legends, some of the writers realized that there was a problem with the Kaminoan clones. They just didn't make sense strategically and economically. It took 9 years to grow a fully matured clone trooper. If you compare that to a battle droid, which only took minutes to complete, it kind of makes no sense that the Republic would use these clones in the first place. There's no way they would ever keep up with the Separatists. And so in Legends, the Republic would actually look at alternative cloning facilities that could produce clones for a much cheaper rate and at a much faster rate. It's a very logical choice. Naturally, you would want to improve any manufacturing process and make it more efficient and streamlined, especially when lives are at stake and you're fighting a war. This is where we see the beginning of the Spartai clones from Spartai Creations. These clones only took a year to reach full maturity. Not only were they grown very quickly, their memories and personalities were actually imprinted directly onto their brains through flash memory. These clones were much less capable than the normal clones from Kamino. They rarely used cover and were terrible shots, and generally kind of empty vessels when it came to their personality. And so these clones also happened to be very obedient and very good at following orders when they could understand what the orders were. The only problem was that the shortened cloning cycle sometimes resulted in psychotic episodes known as clone madness, which usually resulted in a Spartai clone attacking everyone around him, including his fellow clones. Now, Emperor Palpatine developed the Spartai clones without the knowledge of the Republic or even the Kaminoan cloners. He actually set up a base on Centax II, which was a moon directly above Coruscant. He wanted to keep these Spartai clones nice and close. In this way, the Spartai clones are kind of like the Imperial Shock Troopers, who were also created secretly and directly by Palpatine. The Spartai clones, like the elite shock troopers, would play a big role during the transitional period from Republic to the Galactic Empire. They're designed to keep everything stable and peaceful. Their obedience ensured stability during this time period, and Palpatine trusted them far more than the normal clones who were beginning to exhibit troubling signs of humanity and individuality. Because of how quickly a Spartai clone could be created, they quickly outnumbered the original Kaminoan clones. Now, this is sort of a long shot, but again, I think Legends material does routinely come back into play, especially in any kind of animated series by Dave Filoni. But anyway, let me know in the comment section below what you think about my theory. Why do you think all of the clones in these shots are completely identical? It seems a little weird. Or maybe it's just like, a budget issue and they couldn't animate and draw different types of hair on all these clones. Who knows? Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.